look, we can't be more successful than, you know, the culture of this program allows us to be, right? So we've got to have everyone bought in. I mean, some of the experiences that I think of when I've seen teams have unsuccessful seasons, it's because we have an individual mentality, right?
What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Blair Lloyd. She's the Director of Training for Peer Performance over there in Massachusetts. Thank you so much for coming on, Blair.
Honestly, thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm really excited to have you on. I've been able to see your social media content, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have as well, too. There's a lot of very specific things I want to ask you about, too, but we'll start general. Can you just give me a background of your career and then what's brought you to your current position?
Yeah, you got it. So it is like crazy to reflect on the fact that it is 2025. So we've got like a good amount of background now professionally. It's been since 2014 now that I was an undergrad, right? But collegiate basketball player, 4 years. And then when I graduated, it was very interesting, right? So I actually did my undergrad exercise science thinking I was going to go the PT route. I worked in a clinic. I was like, this is not for me. And I think, it's interesting. I think this will kind of really set the tone for where we go. But I had this interest in working with athletes and especially on like the PT side. And I was very nervous that I wouldn't make it at that time. I a lot of self-doubt. And so what ended up happening as I was a TA for anatomy cadaver lab, right? And my professor was like, why don't you go into teaching? There's a bunch of schools that we connect graduates with, and you can teach science. And I was like, well, that kind of meets me where, in a direction that I knew I wanted to go, maybe not exactly it, but I was like, I'm going to give it at least 5 years, right? So a 6-year teaching high school, middle school teaching that I did. I was a sport coach for a while. And then when I left one school to go to another, that became a personal training endeavor. And that was like, those were some like big lessons in that, right? So from a personal training background, I was like, I need to figure out how to really help people. They're going to be spending, it's so funny, right? At the time it was $63. You're going to spend $63 to work with me. I better be worth it, right? So that really started my journey back to education. I got a lot of different like certifications, and I was just constantly seeking what else is out there, what else is there for me to learn. And I'm also high school teaching at the time. So, one environment for personal training became me training my clients out of my home, became me actually becoming a fitness manager. And that's really where things kind of turned back towards like, hey, your thing is this industry over here, right? I was at a place called Vasa Fitness out in Colorado. And from there, right, I still super hungry for all that education. I was like, no, you need to do this. You need to be working with athletes. You need to go back to school. So I actually went and got my graduate degree over at University of Miami. A ton of amazing experiences out there, working with the athletes there as well. A lot of amazing mentorship guidance from UMiami. It's funny, I had a little stint at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, just because it was after grad school as opposed to before because of COVID, right? So we have that all in the mix. And then that landed me at Northeastern University. So I was there for 3 years, took over that internship program toward, the second kind of half of the tenure there. And then time to move on. I'm at Pure Performance now, and I am the director of training over there. So that's like a quick resume breakdown, but lots to probably unpack.
You are, essentially a podcast guest host or a podcast host dream. There's so many things that I can ask you about here. But the first thing that you mentioned was a kind of a little bit of self-doubt you faced with PT. What was that self-doubt, and then how did you overcome it?
So I was young, right? And I think if I really look at my sports career, there's a lot of things that if I look back, I kind of say, hey, that self-talk didn't serve you and didn't serve your team as well as you might have liked it to believe. You might like to have believed it was at the time. So yeah, I knew that it was going to be competitive, right? I knew that if I worked with athletes, there were a lot of other people that also wanted to work with athletes. And it's crazy. Part of that narrative was you played D2 sports. And so therefore immediately there was going to be a barrier to entry because my resume wasn't going to stack up to other people, right? I loved playing like where I played and the way that I was able to compete, but I guess I kind of had a little bit of just, like around saying that it was Division 2 as opposed to Division 1. And, I've always known that I will outwork people, right? Like I've always kept that, but I didn't think that even still was going to be enough. And, you asked an awesome question, which is like, how do you overcome that? And I think, along the way, we continue to overcome the self-doubt that we have because we earn confidence. We get in the arena, we show ourselves that we're able to have a positive impact and that we're able to do whatever it is. And that kind of sets us up to go into the next thing and continue to work hard and continue to overcome. And then again, just that, I think a little bit of self-doubt is appropriate, right? It keeps you humble. It keeps you hungry to learn more. But at the same time, when it's debilitating and it starts to kind of set you back and not pursue the things that you might otherwise want to, that's when there's an issue. So, I'm kind of glad I got a little bit of self-doubt because it does keep me hungry, but I don't let it stop me from being in the arena, and I think that that's really important.
Well, as Blair now, how do you look back at that period? Because we certainly, as all coaches, can relate to that period of self-doubt. And I mean, I think a lot of us can view it as transformative. How do you view it now, many years down in your career?
Oh, I mean, I'm so grateful for all the experiences that I've had. I'm grateful for the person that it's allowed me to be to others along the way. I think about little things and honestly, like that's not the bad things gosh, the things that kind of held me back, have also really set me up too. Right. So like, I think about when I'm in the weight room with athletes and they're going through adversity, and when you're able to authentically sit alongside somebody and help them navigate it because you've faced it yourself, there's such an authenticity in that. And it comes from just a real place. And so I think that's really important for athletes to know that, you haven't always had it together, that you've struggled through some things yourself, and that you've been able to navigate. I think it perpetuates hope for them. Right. And, so I'm super grateful that I've had the experiences that I've had, no doubt.
Yeah, that relatability piece is key. And, I was always worried as a non-basketball player specializing in basketball that I wouldn't really be able to relate to these people. But those lessons you learn early on in your career, I think can be extremely beneficial when you work with your athletes. They understand it, and you can be able to help them through their difficult times.
100%. And like, I think about some other things that have kind of come up along the way too, right? Like so my junior year, going into, it's like the last day of preseason before season starts. Right. And I broke my big toe, and you can't run on a broken big toe. And so I remember like that practice, it was a captain's practice. We're getting after it. I go up for a rebound, jam my toe. Right. And so it was wild because I didn't realize it was broken. I was limping and I knew that it didn't feel right, but it's your toe and whatever, you stubbed it. So fine. And so, I come off of that. Right. And it was the next morning. You're a basketball, you work with basketball guys, so everyone's going to know what this is. We're doing closeout drills. It's a defensive focused practice. Day one, that's what we're doing. And I swear we did the more closeout drills than I've ever done in a practice in my life. And I'm on this broken toe, and so I'm going because it hurts, but whatever. That's kind of what we do as athletes, is we push through. And I remember the athletic trainer calls me over, and she's like, hey, what's going on? And I was like, oh, stubbed my toe, it'll be fine. Takes me my shoe off my sock. You're going to go get x-rays. And I was like, okay. Totally, there's no way, whatever, nothing. So I go get x-rays. They come back. It's broken. I'm like, you're joking me. But all of that to say, it's like, okay, we're broken toe, fine, whatever. I remember though, the next couple of weeks, we're already playing games, right? We're in our season now. And the thing that I have never told like truly anyone this. None of my teammates would know this. But I was like, all right, what can you do? Like, what can you still do? So I got in the weight room. I worked my butt off, right? I could lift weights. And I was like, I'm going to be a great teammate. And that was one thing that, like, I look at myself today and I know that that set my trajectory for who I am and where I am today. And so what I mean by being a great teammate is like, you're going to be, well, one, I've always been pretty lighthearted, you know? So like, all right, when we need some air in the room, let's be that person. Let's, bring some life, bring some energy. But I was a high energy teammate. And then I was super invested on the bench. And so we had an amazing center. And I remember like, just, I was watching her. I was like, whatever I can do to tell you so that you can have great games. Cause I was a power forward. I was like, we're going to make sure that we're locked in and you're like, I'm going to help you be great. And so, I just shared in her successes, right? I would tell her where teams were playing her high side and like no one's coming over to help low side. You have that option to drop, and she would execute it. And I, would be the most pumped up for her. And so, to kind of fast forward to today to like actually answer your question. What happened from there is when athletes would get injured, I could help them with being that type of person, right? Like, hey, you're not limited to just the role that you have when you're on the field. You're on a team that still needs you. And so I could relate to them because I had been there, and I could help them gain a different perspective on how to transition their role from, hey, yeah, like you play defense on the soccer field and you start, but now who are you going to be? And now what are you going to do with that? And I think thinking about trajectory and kind of like where I've been and where I am now, having those insights to be able to share with your athletes, huge. And that's where I am now. That's how I've leveraged some of those things.
Well, one of the things you said that I really love is being able to share in success. How do you preach that to those athletes that you're working with who may be out for an extended period of time? I mean, especially it may even be different from your scenario of being a power forward to a center. I know of some players previously who've done a really great job of the exact same position, a player who was maybe on the bench and now starts, and the starter is injured for a long time. And, it's almost a level of jealousy. I think it's natural, and we all kind of expect that. How do you coach your athletes through understanding that, that success is shared?
I mean, I think that's just such a huge part of leading by example. I like if you're going through it, well, I guess I would answer that a couple different ways, but yeah, I mean, if you're going through adversity, you have a responsibility to continue to learn and grow as much as you can through that adversity. I mean, I will probably talk about this, but I'm in that position right now. I believe that's true for me right now. But yeah, I mean, look, we can't be more successful than, the culture of this program allows us to be, right? So we've got to have everyone bought in. I mean, some of the experiences that I think of when I've seen teams have unsuccessful seasons, it's because we have an individual mentality, right? If I don't think that, and that comes from the talent, the top, from the top of our talent pool to the bottom of our talent pool, uh, like if I have somebody who is on the elite side, and I'm putting things on my shoulders in a way that I believe I'm better than everybody else, that also starts to erode and allows for us to not have that shared success that I'm talking about. And so it's like, this is not in any step of the way, like none of it's ever for me. This is for our team, and I play the role that I play to the best of my ability, and whatever that means. So if that means I'm a great teammate on the bench, I'm a great teammate on the bench. But I almost think that on the opposite side of that is where it really comes down to, like, if I have a teammate that it's the, I don't want to say anybody's name. Obviously, you never would do that. But like, it's the me show. That's also going to start to erode at that. So I think it's like a balance of the whole collective really being locked in on what the goals of the program are, so that they can move everything forward as a unit. And I think you have to have that in order for anybody to be on the injured side, the best player on the field, the kind of the in the middle, the person that looks to play more defensive minded versus offensive minded. I mean, everybody has to have their role and execute to the best of their abilities for their team. And the more people that you have that are bought into that mission, the more success you're going to have.
Yeah, and I love that too, because everybody has a role to execute, and just because you're injured, your role may shift for a little bit of time, but it still means you have a role to execute.
Everything in seasons. I say that all the time, right?
Go.
And I mean, that's like almost a life principle right there. I mean, there's going to be a time period that I've got to focus on this thing because I know where I want to go, and that's going to be different. Again, that season of my life is going to look different than another season. And I think about it like this too. I think our responsibility is that those seasons, we want to add as much intention to those as we possibly can, as opposed to allowing for anything to be the default. And so kind of what I mean by that is, sometimes I think we can let ourselves get pulled underwater by just, oh, I have all this going on and it disallows me to do this thing over here that I know is important. But it's like, but if I add intention to this particular season because I'm aware of what my goals are, I'm going to be able to get a lot further than just trying to keep the ball rolling all the time and whatever kind of comes up becomes the most important thing. I think there's a real alignment and a real intention that we add to that process.
Well, you brought up one of your principles, everything in season. What are your kind of core principles as a coach? What are the things that you really emphasize with the athletes you work with?
So I definitely would just talk about kind of my practice and how I've categorized things so that I make sure to the best of my abilities that I keep no T uncrossed or no I undotted. But I look at 3 different pillars for my practice, right? So what that looks like is you've got values-based coaching, you've got principles-based practice, and so we'll dive into each of those things, and then evidence-based decisions. And between those 3 things, I kind of leverage my background in coaching to kind of help me navigate that. I did a more formal education in organizational leadership, but with an emphasis in coaching. So while I was at Northeastern, I actually got another master's degree. I try to really leverage the principles that I've acquired along the way through formal education, right through some of that continued education that I've done, as well as that education at UMiami. And then I really try to leverage as best as possible, like the sports science background that I've acquired from being at University of Miami and from being at Northeastern, to make sure that there's a KPI that's assigned, let's say, to every adaptation that I aim to elicit with my athletes. And then that informs my decision making, those pieces of evidence that I make sure that I get on my athletes. So those are the pillars that I have for my practice. But all of that obviously unfolds deeper and deeper.
Well, I'd love to hear it. Please expand.
Yeah, you got it. So I think it would just be disingenuous to not say I have values that I think of just for myself as a human being, right? So I'm going to take these things into all facets of my life, coaching, relationships, otherwise. And so altruism for me is huge. I got to leave this thing better than I found it. I think that's why, if I look back, I didn't have it defined, but what really allowed me to move confidently into teaching was really that, right? Help other people be successful in areas where you've found success. That was a sentence that I really took with me from undergrad into teaching, and that stayed with me ever since. And so as I say that out loud, I'm kind of proud of myself for that. That just means to me that I've been very aligned with myself, and that's encouraging for me to kind of continue on. And I would hope that would encourage other people as well. Authenticity. So I have to be truly myself, and, for better or worse, right? I've got to be me, because the right people are going to attract, and the people that doesn't attract, that's okay. That's why so many different coaches can exist. because the ability to have relationships with other people and those look different, I think there's a beauty in that, right? And really finding the environments that we belong to can only happen through being authentic and showing up as ourselves. And I think we do a service by doing that, and we end up being in the right place by doing that. So authenticity is a big one for me. And then integrity, right? If I say I'm going to do something, my actions are going to align, and that's just me having integrity, and that kind of has to shine through in everything that I do. That has to shine through. So that's me as a person. But values-based coaching, right? So from a coaching perspective, I ask my coaches 3 things, and I'm going to show up this way as a coach as well. So empowerment, like, this is not for us, this is for the athletes, and we've got to allow them to embody the confidence that the training should give them. Like, they have to now have that. Because one of the things that I'm going to ask from my athletes as an athlete values ownership. So I can't pass that off to them for them to own it if I don't empower them to do that. And again, so much to talk about there, but that's the one. Commitment, right? So if you invest in me, I'm going to invest in you tenfold. You show up, I'm going to show up. And I mean, that even to the point where, like, Northeastern worked as a 10-month contract, right? And I showed up throughout the summer for those girls just because, like, if you're going to show up, I'm going to show up. And that's, if I'm going to say that these are coaching values of mine, I'm going to embody those coaching values, and I'm going to get here. And I don't necessarily recommend or think that that's the way that you have to do that, but it was the way that I did it. It felt true to me. It felt right to me at that time. And so that's how I did that. And then positive regard is another coaching value. And this is a little different, a little nuanced maybe, but Carol Dweck wrote a book called Growth Mindset. And one of the anecdotes in there that's stuck with me for a long time, because again, that's another book that I read when I was in undergrad. So, I mean, that one's been with me just for a long time. And I think the fact that I was a teacher as well kind of solidified this one. But if I set high standards and high expectations, they're going to get a lot further because of the expectations and standards that I set for them. And if I don't do that, I do them a disservice. They're going to miss the mark. They're going to aim lower, and they're going to hit lower because I didn't set the bar high enough. So essentially that's what positive regard means to me. And then just to recap, athlete values. So ownership, like, this is yours. You have to completely embody this. Your successes are yours, but also your failures are yours. And I don't think failure's a bad thing. It's just, you've got to own the entirety of it. Discipline as a coach, right? You've got to align the intention of what I'm asking you to do and the focus of what I'm asking you to do. And those two things don't always mean, it doesn't have to be high effort all the time if that's not what I'm asking for. And if it is high effort, I expect full effort, right? So that's kind of how I would break down discipline. And then respect. We have to set up an environment that everyone can be successful in. And that's within a session, that's session to session, that you put all your stuff away before you got out of the room so that the next group coming in can be successful here. We're creating an environment where everybody has the opportunity to be successful, and that's how we show respect. So that's kind of that pillar in a nutshell for me, and how I run that all back. So I articulate it to my athletes, to my coaches, to you, and I talk about it.
Well, I love the framework, and I think seriously those things are so valuable, and I think it ultimately changes how you are as a coach. It really defines what is something that you're going to set every day as your intention. What are the standards that you're going to set, and what are your values? What would you say to coaches who haven't necessarily bought into that process quite yet, of having an actual set standard of values or pillars? And I've seen it many times with younger coaches before. I think it's typically younger coaches are the ones who don't have their set values first. What would your advice be to those coaches, or what would you say?
I guess I would, the first thing I would say is I just would want them to have the awareness that that can help them become more confident and more aligned with what they're doing, right? If we've never thought about it before, there's a huge opportunity there, and then from that place, right, once you've if you're willing to establish those things, or maybe it's even just contemplating, you will have more confidence as a coach if you establish those things, because you'll know what you're about. You'll know how you show up. You'll know what you give beyond just the X's and O's of the strength and conditioning practice, right? And, where maybe there's some, I'll use that word again, maybe there's some self-doubt associated with the things that you implement because you're newer to the field. You'll start to establish your value, because it won't be exclusively about the resources that you provide, but the guidance that you give from a who you are and how you show up perspective. So I would just encourage the more that you can get aligned with your practice from the coaching side of things. And I just look at that as like the how you show up and how you do what you do. It really ends up being a game changer.
Yeah, I think it provides clarity for the athletes too, right? They know what to expect. Exactly like you said, you know what to expect each session. You know what you can bring, and it brings confidence for you. But the athletes become a lot more clear on who you are as a coach, and it helps you develop a better relationship as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because I think one thing that can end up being detrimental is the variability in how you show up, right? If you haven't established that, look, you're allowed to have a bad day, meaning, maybe you're sick or something, so your affect is different. Okay, fine. But ultimately, right, the vast majority of the time, athletes should know what to expect from you, and you should know what to expect from you as well. I think that's integral.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I did just previously. It was a small exercise, but I rated what my mood was prior going into the session. And so I rated it out of 10, and then I rated what the session was. And I only did it for a week. My plan was to do it for a month, and then I didn't want to beat myself up and find out that if it was a bad session, I'm clearly the problem, right? Because anytime that my mood was low, or we had like a 5 or 4 out of 10 going into the session was pretty much the same. And then obviously the times I had good moods, the session was much better as well too. So that really just goes to show and reflect that if you have these set values, it can help you have high quality sessions consistently as well.
No, I love that practice. As much as, we get to learn from each other through this, I love that exercise. I think there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, it was certainly eye opening, right? Because it's easy to blame the athletes. I think sometimes it's easy to be like, well, Joe was really in a bad spot today, and he upset me, and it was like, well, or was I upset previously to the session, and then that's what actually drove it. It made me look at Joe a little bit differently than I typically would. I mean, it was such small behaviors, like if somebody was maybe moving slow through a session, I probably approached it on different days as well, based on what my mood was. If somebody's moving slow, and I said, hey man, you kind of need to hurry up a little bit, and I didn't get the answer I liked, then I might coach that person a little bit harder. But if I was in a good mood, I might have been more encouraging as a coach and helped uplift them a little bit. And we could have gotten a much more productive result out of that session.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's so good. I would, if you're willing, I mean, look, the first thing is, if you're ever willing to rate yourself a 4 with your mood, at least you're willing to be honest with yourself. Like, because I think there's a lot of people that, would just, no, I feel great. No, I feel great. No, I feel great. I think like step one of the things, if you're willing to rate yourself a 4, I think there's real opportunity just insofar as your own ability to be reflective. Because the more that we're able to be reflective, the further that we're going to end up going. So I think that's huge. Step one is like, you're willing to be honest about it. And then you're willing to see what happens as a result. That's huge. I like that activity a lot. I might steal it from you, to be honest with you.
You have free reign. I promise you. I stole it from somebody else.
There you
that's
go,
how
right?
It works.
That's what we do here.
Okay. Well, one thing I definitely want to touch on is something you've spoken about in your blog and posted on social media. Did you have any other big injuries besides the broken toe during your basketball career?
I broke the opposite side toe my
wow.
senior year.
My
almost the exact same mechanism too, which is insane. So except for this time, instead of it being the last day of preseason, it was our first exhibition game of the season. So my junior year and my senior year actually started off the season with breaking each big toe. And then, I mean, just professionally, I actually took a nosedive. I was mountain biking in Colorado. I went over my handlebars. I broke both my wrists.
Oh.
So that was a tough injury to come back from, for sure. But again, a lot of good lessons from that at that time. But I was like 24 years old, and then at 32 over here, went ahead and tore my ACL. But first time
Wow.
tearing my ACL.
So, I mean, I just want to, can you kind of take me through that rehab process? I'm sure frustration, I'm sure, like you said, from your other injuries, you gained a lot of really positive things out of it as well.
Yeah. So the first thing that kind of happened in that process, right? Well, other than me hobbling off of the turf and getting myself in a chair and kind of reconciling what all had happened, um, I was like, this is going to be a good thing. Like, you are going to make this a good thing. You have to. And that was a really early thought. You're going to become more empathetic. You're going to have to go through this, and so the process of having to do something is going to make you face adversity, and you're going to end up again on the other side of this. And so I've been very determined to make sure that every lesson that there's an opportunity to glean from this, that I do. Um, so some of that has again been actually some of that has been one of the coolest things that I've taken from this is there have been some just amazing human beings that you meet along the way, and that find out that you tear your ACL, and that have checked in on a semi-frequent basis. Like, hey, how are you doing? How's the knee holding up? And it's like immediately that is the kind of leader and coach you want to be. And it's like, because it means so much to you. And I just think about look, I'm not going to beat myself up too bad. It's like the power of regret. It's like you look at it, you go, man, I wish I would have done that. And you go, all right, cool. Like, I have the opportunity to do that, and we'll like keep it rolling. But, I've coached so many athletes who have had ACL tears, and, you know, the kind of semi-frequent checking in and just being a little bit more shirt up on that, I would absolutely do, because it's meant so much to me. And super grateful for those coaches that have just had that empathy and that forethought to do that. Another one of my big thoughts is like, man, this is challenging, and like, I'm going through it at 32. Imagine going through it at 18, 19, sometimes younger, sometimes older, right? But it's like, this is a tough one, because like so much of my identity for sure is in my coaching, right? Like, it's what I love doing. And so the fact that it's got to change a little bit, it has been tough. And then it's like, and then you ask somebody who's younger to do that, that's not as equipped, mentally and emotionally, just because they haven't had that amount of time to reflect. It's like, ooh, all right, like, you've now got that opportunity to really come alongside them and be that empathetic, coach, and support them in that way, because you can truly understand what they're going through. Yeah, I mean, the first 5 weeks are just brutal. It's so much and even still, like, I'm 10 weeks out today post-op, and it's just like so much after surgery is just challenging. And so, okay, fine, it's challenging, but all right, it's challenging for them too. So know that, and know that you're going to be able to show up better for them as a result.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really valuable is recognizing that as coaches, when we get older, we have a lot more, I would say, skills at just being able to handle things that life throws at us, right? I remember
Absolutely.
being told no to go to a party when I was 17, and I thought everything was over, right? And now
Sure.
I'm the one who would rather not go to that party.
Sure.
Those things are very different. So I think that's a really key insight as well, is that what may seem like a smaller deal or something that we could kind of easily handle. Obviously, being an ACL injury, we all understand, is a very big process, no matter what age. But when you reflect on it and you look at how would I handle this as an 18-year-old, it's probably different than how you would handle it now.
I mean, I'm so grateful that I didn't go through that when I was an athlete, if I'm being super transparent. And then, you just realize that they are sometimes, and it's like, all right, well, and then, I think that's really where I've had like an opportunity to thrive through this whole thing, is like, hold on, there's so much as a performance coach that I can give to them to keep them focused on just the opportunity to progress forward and do meaningful things that set them up for success when they come back. And that's one of the things that I was really motivated to do. And the day that my jump height is higher than it was before, I get to use Hawken force plates. I'm very fortunate in that way, right? So the day that my jump height is higher than it was going into this, I'm going to be like, let's go. Right. But there are things that I'm doing now that are setting me up for that. And I believe that. I know that that's true. And so that's really where it's like, I'm going to be so much more equipped to like support athletes on the performance side, because there are things that I can still achieve. That's what I'm focused on. And it's going to have those outcomes down the road. And like, that's what I want to share with athletes down the road. And so it's like, cool, I'll experience it now. I'll set myself up so that I'm just more aware of what those things are. And it's not to say I won't learn more things, but I'm at least that awareness sets me up. Because I think one of the things that I've always really leaned on athletic trainers to like take on that role, that process. And that's great. But like, as a performance coach, you also have those opportunities to step in and provide guidance and those interventions for where they're at that are going to support them long term.
How have you honed the skill of positive self-talk? Because to me, it's a skill that you can work on. But I mean, the two instances I can think of already, just speaking with you, is dealing with self-doubt early on in your career, and then learning how to be more positive with yourself. And then, I mean, almost immediately after undergoing an ACL injury, saying, well, this is going to be a good thing. How have you developed that skill for yourself?
I mean, if you ask me my favorite genre is of like reading, it is researcher authors in the field of psychology. And again, I'm just so big on awareness. I think if something comes into your periphery and it resonates and you let it in, that's going to set you up to be better. And so that's like one of the big encouragements I give to coaches relatively often is it's like, hey, like, you go through this process of undergrad, grad school. And honestly, like, I kind of wish you even had it before that, but still it's like your responsibility now is to critically think through everything that you're exposed to. And I just would put this in the category of psychology, but that's truthful with any of, thing that you learn. And as things resonate, they feel true to you, like continue to pursue those things and allow yourself to grow in that way. And so, right off the bat, it's like, from like a leadership perspective, you've got so many great authors. Brene Brown is fantastic. You've got Daniel Pink, who's wonderful. You've got Adam Grant, who's unreal. And it's just like all of those. And I know that I'm like missing some. If I go look at a bookshelf real quick and come back, but Angela Duckworth, unreal, like just so many unreal people. And it's like, that's what I gravitated to early on. Insofar as me just wanting to live this life to the fullest, I guess. And I know where my passions lie. And I've always tried to pursue things that are aligned to some degree. And I think in that process, it's just allowed me to kind of come on to the other side, not even the other side, right? Because it's still a process. Let's not even pretend we're done growing, right? But that's really allowed me to kind of channel these things into who I am and how I've developed some of my kind of core beliefs.
It's a more fun way to live, ultimately.
I think
living
so.
on the positive side. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other part of it too is, like I've been coaching since I was, I think the earliest coaching experience I had was like 14 years old. So I've always been like relatively athletically inclined. That's very fortunate. My genetics are great in that way. And so, you're on varsity playing sports, right? And when you play varsity sports, there's kind of this, and then part of that, at least in my community where I grew up was, well, then you go and you coach younger kids, right? And so, by the time I was, a junior and senior, I'd been doing that for years already from like the, clinic side and coaching younger kids. But then like a lot of that started to become my own at a very young age. The first time I ran my own clinic, I got a call from like our recreation authority, and it was like, can you staff this and run this clinic? It's going to be a volleyball clinic. It's here. Can you do that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get paid now. And so, but I think I'm so fortunate to have been kind of pushed in that direction where it's like, yeah, if you have to set something up, it's on you. You got to go do it. And then I did. Right. And so I think those experiences though, where you're just giving back what you do to others, and that starting so young has also kind of been just a part of it where I didn't have control over that. Right. My environment controlled that on my behalf. And then, I think I just kind of shouldered the responsibility of, well, then really be great at that. Like really go and do that.
Mm. And so this leads perfectly into one of my questions for you. Obviously you are a mentor coach, you help other coaches. What is the importance of mentor coaching for coaches? If I'm somebody who is, never opened my eyes to the kind of mentor side of the world, what would be your quick selling points for it and why it could be so valuable?
Oh, I'm like the worst at quick selling points. I mean,
Okay, then a long sell.
Oh, I know. I told you, like, I get ranty. I just I try to really do my best job to create a safe space for somebody to explore what they're struggling with when they come and talk to me. No, like there's no pressure, like insofar as like that, those initial things, but I just try to create that space where, like, if you come to me, there's no judgment. It's just, what are you going through? And let me just try to add value, like, right away. But I do notice there's a lot of it comes down to confidence. And so we've got to, so what I try to do is, it's like, well, let's figure out what you're really good at first, because you're already coaching. So what are you good at? And let's spell that out so that you've identified for yourself what you're falling back on, right? Like, this is what I've got, this is what I do. Great. And it's like, and then we can build from that place. But until we've established that from a, hey, are you someone who's good at building rapport, and as a result you get better buy-in? Know that that's a huge strength. That's not a nothing quality insofar as you as a coach. That's a massive strength that you should know that you have to leverage. So regardless about how you feel about your X's and O's, know that if you notice your ability to build relationships is good, do that at an excellent level, and like continue to leverage that. Some of the things sometimes you don't even realize, like the story that you're telling yourself, until somebody kind of like is willing to hit like a pause, and then will tell me more about that. And then you kind of start to uncover some things that might not be serving you. And like, you don't know, again, like if this is your default belief, you're not, it's never been interrupted. Right. You don't have an opportunity to kind of grapple with that. But I think sometimes having somebody that helps you navigate that process, again, like that judgment free, psychologically safe environment for you to just discuss. And then also for me, have some of those, so yeah, for sure. Like, we need to have like the practical tools, the implementation, the why behind the what, to help somebody navigate what it is that they do. Because then that's another thing that I noticed too, is a lot of times in this industry, you're told so much what to think. And there's not a lot of like substance sometimes. And so you get lost in, I want to do this great job, but like, how do I know that I'm doing that? And so that's why, again, like, that's why the pillars that I have are so true to me, is like, well, I want to be able to assess my intervention. So I've got to have that duality there. So again, like, helping somebody create that, again, just gives them confidence to execute. And so from the coaching side, we've got to figure out who you are and what your strengths are. From a practice side, let's make sure that we build that up. And if that's something that people struggle with, I would encourage you to receive some mentorship, because it has the opportunity to be personalized to you. I mean, if you're in a position where like there's just gaps insofar as your knowledge, go get the knowledge, right? Like, go get the X's and O's. But if you've been doing this for a while, and there's still something that is inconsistent, going through that with somebody is just so powerful. And like, that was really created in my environment at Northeastern. Like, I'm so grateful that I have that. I am on a mentor coaching team as well. And so like, when I grapple with things, I do have coaches that I feel very comfortable and confident going to help me move forward. Which, if it's not a mentor, develop awesome network, because in your network too, right? In your network, there can be a lot of things that are uncovered from that perspective too. Again, just I can't speak highly enough about the people that I've come into contact with along the way that have continued to like leave that door open for me to continue to receive guidance when I've felt that I've needed it, and to continue to move my understanding forward.
Well, one of the things I think is really valuable about it is it's a completely objective person, right? It is somebody who you can speak to that is not a friend. There's no context in the, of us, spending all these years together. So I remember when I struggle with some things, I might, reach out to a fellow coach who I've known for a long time, and they try to kind of hype me up a little bit. And it's like, well, you're just saying that because I'm a friend of yours, right? And you're just trying to be positive and everything. Whereas if I had heard it from somebody who was completely objective, I might take that feedback a little bit differently. And I might kind of believe it more, if that makes sense.
The other thing that I'm going to just add to that, because I totally think that you're right, is that when you look at that person that you choose to be your mentor, there should also be qualities about that person that excite you, right? Whether that's like from an aspirational perspective, whether that's as a human, as a coach, like their career, whatever that is, like wherever you kind of are finding that you need help and support, look at that person and make sure that it aligns with what you aspire to. I think that's a huge part of it, because, I also will tell coaches, like, you got this feedback from someone. Do you aspire to be that person? Do you aspire to coach like that person? Well, then maybe that feedback can just pass through. Maybe we don't have to hold on to that feedback, but maybe we could just let that one go, because not everybody, deserves a place in your practice, and that's okay. You can acknowledge that their intent was good, but you can go ahead and just let it go, and that's also okay. And that can also be really powerful too, because sometimes when we get feedback, especially from like an authority, whatever that looks like for some people, it can also kind of be that catch-22 where it's like, you gave me advice, I appreciate that you were willing to give me advice, but you don't have to take it. And sometimes there's huge benefit in just being able to communicate that to someone.
Yeah, I think empathy becomes really huge in that one too, because I remember I had a former intern come in, and he just visited for the day, and we were speaking, and he just said he was kind of struggling with, his supervisor, and they kind of disagreed on a lot of things. And it was almost that exact point too. It was like, well, you kind of got to put yourself in his shoes, understand where he's coming from, understand some frustrations he might have in his career right now, and understand why, he might just be taking some things out on you. And you have to understand those things. And again, let it pass by, like you said. I like that phrase really well.
Yeah, we're all human, and we're all navigating this thing. I think if you give people the benefit of the doubt, which I would encourage, I think you live a much happier life when you would just say, hey, that person was trying to give me their best, thank you. And then again, that we're not a sponge and absorbing everything, but instead, allow for that filtration. You're critically thinking, you have ownership over your practice. Again, this comes back to like so many of those values, and this is yours. Like, so take it if you want it, but you don't have to take everything. And I often will say that I picked up a great, adopt, adapt, replace framework along the way. And I love that so much, because it's like, thank you so much for like being willing to give me that. Let me figure out if it resonates and it's real, it's true for me, it's authentic for me to add it, if I could adapt it and make it right for this context, or if it's just not right. And I think you have to know that you have enough that if it's not right, you can't let it go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just not to let those things weigh you down, because it can be very tiring.
Yeah. If you let everything, kind of come in, yeah, at some point, like not everything can serve you, and that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. The acceptance piece, which I love. Well, Blair, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and enjoyed really getting to know more about you and what you do. I think it's been really exciting for me.
If that's time, that's wild, man. Time flies.
I know,
I genuinely,
by,
it did. It really did. Thank you so much for this, Connor. I appreciate it. I look forward to keeping in touch.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to follow you on social media, follow your blog, or wants to potentially be mentor coach, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, so easy enough to get to me. Built for this sports performance. That's Instagram handle, and then website. Just put a .com after that. Everything through there. So easy enough.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Blair. I really appreciate you.
You have a good rest of your day, Connor.
You as well.